Okay, it's time for the critique of the third monthly theme, and this month was shadows. And as always, this is the system I'm going to use to conduct the critiques. First consideration is, does it fit the theme? And as I said, it was shadows this month. And again, that's going to tend to be more abstract type of images. But the important part in regards to this theme is the image dependent on the shadows? Do the shadows make the image what it is? The next consideration is going to be artistic and aesthetic considerations. And to a certain extent, that's just going to be my personal opinions and feelings about the image. And third is going to be technical considerations. Things like depth of field, shutter speeds, settings used, and additional compositional considerations, which could go to aesthetic as well. The grading system is A, I wish I had taken that picture. B, I would be happy with that picture if I had taken it. C, I probably wouldn't keep the picture unless there was a particular affinity for it for some other reason. D, it does meet the requirements, but has major flaws, technical flaws. And F, well, we won't have any Fs. All right, keep in mind that what follows is just my opinion. And this month, the theme seems to have been a problem for many people, as we don't have that many submissions. So I decided I would do something a little different this time. And I've taken everyone's images and I've brought them into Lightroom, which should allow me to do some minor quick edits to demonstrate what I'm thinking about certain things. All right, so we're going to get started. And first image here is by Hayward. And let's take a look. And the first considerations are settings. All right, so we've got 180 at f8, 18 millimeters, way more than enough shutter speed. ISO 800, probably a little higher on the ISO than is necessary. And it kind of looks like there might be a little bit of excessive ISO noise, lack of detail in there, but that could also be some of the processing, I don't know. So probably could have taken a lower ISO and a little lower shutter speed down to around 1/60th or so with an 18 millimeter, and that might have been a little better. All right, as to the image, I really like this image. It's definitely dependent upon the shadows. It's kind of a moody image, but one of the first things that strikes me is that it's pretty monotone. Now, I would say it's well captured because it's a high contrast scene, and we've done a good job of keeping the highlights under control and exposing in the shadows. I imagine some of that was covered with processing, but anyways, I don't know that you could have done a better job with this exposure in a single exposure. If you wanted to push things a little further, we could have probably done a combination of exposures, bracketed, combined them in post, if you were really motivated for that. All right, looking at this image, the first thing that strikes me is something's out of kilter here. It feels like we're sloping, and I know that this point to this point should be directly across from each other. They have to be, because these are arch supports. All right, so something's out of whack here, and I think it's that we were not centered left and right when this image was taken. So we're turned a little bit, focusing down a hall here, and in process of centering the doorway, which is great, we've caused this misalignment. We could fix that. Go down here to lens corrections. Well, get rid of the highlight tool so my pen works, and we'll get to lens corrections, and we could fix this. Let's see, we want to go that way to get things lined up. But as you can see, we lose a lot of image. We lose a lot of image, and then we'd have to crop it hard in order to compensate for that. And so if we could have gotten aligned, centered everything up so that we didn't have to fix it with lens correction, that would have been better. Or if you know you're going to have to use lens correction, frame loose so that we can recover and have additional image here to crop out later without adversely impacting our image. So let's see what we can do with this now that we've got this created here. See if we can bring this in. And I'm going to go ahead and bring this side in as well to give me some uniformity, left and right. Alright, a little square for my liking, but that's fixed that. We kind of caused a little bit of distortion up here with the lens correction. So again, probably not ideal. Alright, what would I do with this image? Aesthetically, I find it a little flat, a little lacking in contrast. So let's see what we can do as far as that goes. Let's go ahead and bump the contrast up. Make this a little darker. We'll just drive it up here like that. Alright, I'm going to take an adjustment brush because I don't like what it's done up here on the ceiling. So I'm going to take an adjustment brush and we're going to bring the exposure up. We're going to cover that back up in here. So let's bring that back. Alright, and then I want to go ahead and I'm going to bring this area in here. I'm going to highlight this. Alright, so what I've done is I've created more contrast, darker shadows, and I've drawn the attention to the stairs, the opening stairs going somewhere, to give this more of an emotional impact and take it out of that flat. It really gives it a point of focus here now. And we could go ahead and we could do another brush here and bring this down if we wanted to. That looks like crap, so I'll just undo that. All right, let's take highlights down. All right, so we'll just pull that down a little bit with highlights, make it not quite as bright. All right, so we've got this image where we ended up versus this image which we brought in, and I think the difference is notable. As an image, Shadow's image, I give it a B. The process like this, I like it quite a bit. I would put it B plus and refine it perhaps further. But this gives you an idea of what I would do with that image. All right. All right, here's our next image, and it is by Peter. And we've got a 13-second exposure at f/18, ISO 100, 70 millimeter. All right, so 70 millimeter f/18. It's not a long shot. So maybe the f/18 was necessary for depth of field. Obviously a tripod was used, so that's a good thing. And I don't have any major issues with the f/18. I don't know that it was great. There's not a lot of sharpness in there, but the backlighting will contribute to that significantly. All right. So no real problem with the settings, and I don't see where it's hurt the image significantly. Primarily because this image is about the shadows, and it's a very strong shadow image. I really like it. For me, there's a couple problems. First is it's blue, got red stuff in there. I really want that white, and if you were to print this, that'd be problematic. And to me, this color noise stuff here, to me that detracts. I know some people might like that, but to me it draws too much attention. So what I would do with this image to fix that is I'd convert it to black and white. Now obviously I don't want it actually black and white. I want it to be, I like that color that it had. So let's go here and we're going to grab a yellow color somewhere in there. Maybe that color stinks. Let's go something a little drabber. Something in there. Let's see what we get. And we'll go ahead and paint that back in. So we'll bring the color back into this. And I'm not being real careful. I've got a little bit up there. So I'll go ahead and erase that up here on this trash can area. Alright, and let's see, maybe we want to pull the highlights down. Maybe drive those up a little bit, give us a little more contrast. I'll leave that alone. Alright, let's go back to our hue saturation, because we can take that area that was blue and we can drive that up and brighten up those areas. So you can see we've restored some sparkly here, and this brought this brighter white, made it a little more uniform. Looks like a little yellow in there, so we'll bring that up a little bit too. And that's about what I would do with the image color-wise. I think that should have fixed our issues in there as far as color goes. It did, and it's removed the sparkly bit here. And I can only assume it's due to being on a linoleum tile that's caused that refraction into the colors where the lights refracted back at us. Alright, the other problem I have with this image is the shadow line. I like the shadow line down here. It's not quite straight, but I don't like it here. And I like it even less here because it's less straight. If we go in here and I were to draw a straight line here, let me get that. Come on. I'll draw that line as straight as I can get it. Right about there. Right now that line is straighter. I think that's overdone a little bit, but it's kind of lost the symmetry in the background more so, and we don't want that. So we can, because we had better symmetry here, still not quite symmetrical. And if I draw a line here to balance this, we're off the other way a little bit. This side's a little taller, and the level of the trash can's gone. So I think the way you composed it, you did about as well as you could. But part of the problem, I think, is that this isn't exactly centered. The trash can's twisted a little bit, and because it's twisted and the trash can's tapered, it's causing it to lean out just a little bit, which is causing this whole alignment to be off. So if we hadn't use this to create this leading line, we wouldn't have that problem. And I don't, even though I like it down here in the shadows, I don't know that it's required, because all these lines converging together right through this point create a leading line on their own. So I think I would have preferred this part in the background, and I think so that would have made my the weave and the light more consistent through here, and I don't think we needed it. But as it is, if you wanted to use it, it's just a case of having to be very meticulous about the setup, making sure you're absolutely square to this line and that it's pointed exactly at you, so it's not going off at an angle, so all this lines up exactly vertically. But as it is, I think you did about as well as you could. Overall image, I give it a A. A minus. I really like it. And as it is, I would definitely be happy with that one. Good job, Peter. All right, here's an image, and it's by Carol. And we've got 23 millimeter 1/2000th f2.8. Okay, I remember this camera. It's a fixed lens, f2.8 23 millimeter lens, and ISO 200 I think is about as low as it goes. So 1/2000th is what you got, and certainly fast enough. So I don't see any problem with those settings. First thing is 23 millimeter is going to have more depth of field regardless, for it's a short focal length, and we've got a little bit of a distracting background back here. We've got a dragonfly shadow, and it took me a while to realize that what we've got is a bird bath, and this is a reflection through the water, and we're not really seeing the water. And I think that's kind of contradictory. The only thing the water is really doing is causing these bright points and this reflection here, and in an extent those are somewhat distracting from the image. So if you wanted it in the water, I think something needed to do in order to emphasize the fact that it's in the water, because composing it this way, working with a bird bath, a fixed feature, and all the restrictions that put on you, if you're going to go through that, you might as well emphasize it. One thing we could do, or could have done, would have been to create a ripple in the water, and that would have emphasized the fact that there is water there. Another thing we could do is we can pull these highlights down, create a sense of depth to it, and it feels a little more like there's water there. To me, the saturation's a bit on the high side, so I'll just bring that down a little bit. Get a little more sense of water. If otherwise, you could have taken this image pretty much with anything as your background. It could have been on a piece of wood, it could have been on a plate to have this circular composition, the leading line of the edge here, which works well. But like I said, if you're gonna go through the hassles of working with this restricted setup and have the water there, natural environment of a dragonflyer, I get it. Just try to do something to emphasize the fact that there is water there. All right. Next thing I see, this background is busy. It's a little busy, and again, that just comes from the fact that we chose to work with a bird bath. So let's see what we can do here. We're going to take our adjustment brush and let's kill the contrast. See what we get. That's not looking good, but we'll keep going with it because I can. We can take the clarity out of this, take the highlights out of it, and we can take the exposure down and make it a little less distracting. Alright, obviously you'd want to be a little more careful with that than I would. Overall, it is a shadow image. As a shadow image, I think this leading line would be better if it kind of divided the two, because right now it's pointing to the dragonfly thing, and I'd prefer it here or in between. But I give it a C plus. Most of my problems with it are due to the restrictions of the situation that you put yourself in, and then not maximizing it. So we started here with that image, and we ended here with this image. Feels a little more like water, background's a little less distracting, but we're still C plus for me. Alright, our next image, and I believe this one is again from Carol. This is a 1/60th f5.6 IS200 and 23mm. Handhold, I assume, and there's no problem with that at all. The settings look good to me. I5.6 is sharp. The first thing with this image is the mood. I really like the mood of this image. This image says to me a relaxed breakfast at a cozy home kind of thing. The lighter tones of the white on white on white gives it a nice airy, relaxed feel. And the browns are nice and warm. It gives it the sunrise. I guess the eggs goes with the sunrise. This could have been sunset, but it gives you that warm, relaxed, cozy, homey kind of feeling. And I think that's the most important thing of this image. And because of that, I think we're composed a little too tight, especially down here on, especially down here on the bottom edge. We're real tight. I would like to see more of the environment, the atmosphere. And as far as a shadow image goes, these lines from the blind really do make this image. They give you, I don't know, a sense of being protected from that hard sun and sitting near a window but comfortable. And they add a lot of interest to this image. Alright, so settings wise, I don't have a problem. It looks a little oversaturated to me. Let's see what kind of, we got some blown whites, shadow clipping. You're going to have that when you're dealing with shadows. This specular highlight blown here, that doesn't really bother me. Let's take a look down here and turn on soft proofing and make sure, we'll just look at RGB. Alright, doesn't look too bad. Now you noticed when I had a paper in there, we have different clipping problems. This would be saturation. So depending upon the output, but since we're working with a computer and computer displays, we'll just leave it at sRGB. And it looks pretty good to me. Not too bad. My impression was a little oversaturated here in the oranges, and you know, we could just maybe pull the vibrance down and bring the saturation up a little bit. That didn't seem to make much difference. All right. Compositionally, besides being tight, I don't think we're level at all. That kind of, So if I go midpoint to midpoint like that, so that's about where level is, and we can't really see the table edge, but it seems a little, I don't mind it being at a little bit of an angle, but it seems a bit excessive to me. I want a more level at least, and looser. I think that's my two big comments on this image. I give this a C plus, B minus, and I think if it was composed looser and focusing more on the emotion and the feeling, you know, these are eggs. It's not really a macro shot of eggs. This is about the feeling and the emotion it conveys. So I pay more attention to that, and this would have been a B plus, I think, in there. Maybe even better, I don't know. Nice image. Alright, this is an image by Adrian, and we've got 18mm lens at f8, 1/320th, ISO 100. I see no issues whatsoever with the settings. And yeah, the processing is a little sepia tone to me, and I don't mind that. But due to the hard contrast, the highlights didn't take any of the sepia toning, and this area here for me draws a lot of attention because it's bright white, and we're in the 98% range here, which as far as a display goes is pretty well clipped. And the skies over here, you can see those are all clipped to pure white. Excuse me. So the contrast is a bit much for me in that area, and I don't know what I would do differently. As far as a shadows image goes, I don't know. I'm not sure I focus on the shadows. They're there, they're important, but I don't know. And I don't know what I would do with this necessarily. We could knock the contrast down, and we can't really pull the highlights because you notice if I hover over the histogram up here in the right corner down, you'll see that the whites are, the number next to the whites is highlighted. That's telling me the whites is that section of the histogram, and I already know that, but so I could pull the whites down, see if we can get rid of the clipping. Yeah, we're probably not going to recover that sky without going to gray. Pull the whites down. It does help a lot in this area over here, so I think that's better. Our shadows are still important. All right, I don't really know what I would do this beyond this as far as image goes. It's interesting. It's not entirely abstract. I don't know. I don't know what I would do to this. I think that's a little better. All right, anyways, for me this image is a C plus. I put it as a C plus, maybe a B minus. I might keep it, but I think it's one of those images that I would grow to not like as much over time. So B minus, C plus on that one. All right, another one by Adrian, and we've got 1/100th at f8, ISO 455 millimeter, plenty of shutter speed. ISO is higher, but it's not into a problem range, so I don't have an issue with that. Or shouldn't be a problem range, depends. All right, we got some blown highlights there, which for printing or anything like that is going to be an issue. They won't go that white. We could pull those down. And as far as being a shadow image, to me, what really makes this image is all these triangles, these highlight triangles here and here. So it's the light in the shadows, and obviously without the shadows we wouldn't have the light. I find that very interesting. I also like that we have strong leading lines. We have, you know, in a way it's contradictory. What we have is reduction in size of a repeating form, which causes a depth, which therefore causes leading. But it's not necessarily leading lines unless you just connect these corners. Okay, you just connect those corners, but that doesn't really work as well, because when I look at this image, and I always do this, and when I first look at an image, I try to pay attention to what I see first. Because when you first look at something, you look for something to identify it, to latch on to. Usually it's eyes with people. With this image, it's right here. This is what I see first. All right. And that's an odd place to look first. And most people will look in the center, just overall at the image, and if they don't see anything there, they're going to look over here. And if they don't see anything there, they're going to kind of jump around till they find something. And people say that's reading an image left to right, but it's not really. All right, first thing we do is just look for something we can identify, latch onto, and for me it's this spot because it's one of the brightest and the most contrasty. So that's where I look first. And because of that, I find that I follow these lines here more predominantly over to this dark section. And that's not where you want my eyes to go. That's not what we want. All right, so to me that's a bit problematic. These are competing with this regression in size and the leading line that you do want me to follow. All right, so what can we do about that? Well, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to flip this image. All right, now when I look at this image, I'm looking more in the area where I expect to look first, the upper left as far as reading goes. So what I see and where it puts my eyes are both things it's closer to where I want to be. And now I tend to follow it more this way. Still have a couple problems with this image. To me, this area here is a bit heavy and imposing, and we don't have our repetition of form here anymore. So I would crop this image, and I would probably crop it, let's see, take out your framing there. Look for something maybe more of a 4:3 type aspect. I'm going to bring this side in. And right about to there. Alright. Making that a little larger. We've kept our last triangle there. We've kept the repetition. We've kept this last form. And now where I look first is up here in this corner, and I much more want, for me anyways, I much more want to follow this diagonal in the repeating form. This area being dark, it's in a secondary area off to the right side background. It doesn't have as much weight to me as it did before we flipped the image. So if we go back down here, and actually let's do this. I just go back here and flip it again. It just doesn't read as well to me because I have to get over here and then come back down to this corner, and I don't want to do that for some reason. It works better this way for me. Right, we do have a little bit of a lean to this because we're pointed up, and we could fix that if we wanted to, and I don't think it would hurt this image. So, whoops, I don't want horizontal, I want vertical. Clear that out. Let's do vertical. Alright, straighten up that line. We'll fix our composition here. We'll pull this in and over. Right about here, I think. That's a 4-3 aspect is what we've ended up with. And I think we're good. This is about where I would leave this image. I would still have that. Let's go ahead and recover that stuff. We've pulled that down as far as we can. So pull the highlights after we pull the top. Alright, so at least we got rid of the clipping. Still looks to me like it's going to read pretty high. It's 93s, so it's not clipping. Right, and as an image composed this way, with a few minor corrections, I put this image as a B+. I like this image a lot. Nice job. Alright, this is my image, and I don't know. I kind of burned out on this image. It was a concept image. It was meant to be a story of being forced with a hard decision, the stay or go, leaving a relationship or anything like that. The shoes are intentional. It's meant to make it feel like those are your shoes in first person. And the grass is intentional to give a feeling of comfort and softness versus the hardness of the road and the decision. I don't know. I think maybe the whole idea and concept is a little too abstract. It didn't convey as well as I wanted to. I did add this line in here. And I think that works better because when I look at this image, the first thing I see is the suitcase. It's the heaviest, darkest black. That's the first thing I see. And then this line kind of ties it together with the sign shadow. That's in between. I don't know. It worked better with a line for me than it did without. But I don't know. I don't think it conveys as well as I had hoped. And it has the shadows. It's dependent on the shadows, but in a way the shadow of the stop sign has become a stop sign and not a shadow. And so I'm not sure this is a shadow image anymore. I give it a B-. I don't know. I don't know what I could do better. If I did, I would have. So, yeah, B- for me. Alright. And here we have an image by Heather. And because I stole this image, I don't have any EXIF here. I did look at the EXIF and I didn't see any issues with the settings used. And I really like this image. It's a neat concept. When I look at this image, the first thing I see is obviously it's definitely a shadow image. And it has a great feel to it, but it's too much empty space. You know, when you see a landscape and there's just a whole bunch of sky that doesn't serve a lot of purpose, we always say, you know, crop it out, focus. And I feel like it loses impact as it fades to black here. It loses impact. You want to, the idea here is you're standing in front of a city, a skyline, and the light's coming through and hitting you in these heavy streaks, but we're so far out. We're back here in the black area. That was where I'm standing. You know, it's out here in this black area that it loses some of that impact. So one of the first things I would do is crop this. I'd get rid of some of that excess sky, and I'd pull it in so that as a viewer, I'm standing right here in that transition. I'm still getting hit by the bright light. I'm not all the way off in the shadows. All right, right about there. And let's see where we're at balance-wise. To me, that right there has improved the image significantly already. Now I feel like that light is hitting me, and we've gotten rid of some of the excess sky that really didn't have anything extra going for it. So we went from that, oops, darn it. We went from that to there, and then to about here. I might even bring this down a little further, get us into an aspect ratio that's frameable. There's a 6:7 composition, a little square for my taste, but that feels a lot stronger to me. It doesn't feel quite centered to me. Let's take a look here. There's my center line, and let's see, 1, 2, 3 is dead on a 3. 1, 2, 3. That looks, I don't know, for some reason it doesn't feel quite centered. But I think this is about all I would do with this image. See what we're at as far as, there's a little bit of clipping, just a little bit, less than you would think. And pull that down. See if we get rid of it. Maybe some highlights, just tone it down a little bit. Maybe bring those whites back up. Alright, something there. That's about all I would do with this image. Maybe crop it into a little more of a landscape type aspect, being that it's a landscape image. It's meant to simulate a city skyline. I think that's a little too tight on the top. Maybe right in there. Yeah, right about there is where I'd be. Alright. Nice concept, well executed, and I like this. I'm going to give this image a B. So it's a solid B for me. Well done. Alright. Picture by MJ, and I really like this image. It's a cute image. Let's see, we got 10 seconds at f8, ISO 100, 35 millimeter. Alright, stop down for sharpness. 10 seconds, use the tripod. So everything looks good to me. And I like the concept of this image. We've got the dinosaur creating the shadow. A couple things that strike me about this image is, well, when I first saw it, I thought the shadow's not dark enough and this is too bright. This area here draws too much attention. So I thought about cropping. Let's do this. I'm going to make a copy. I thought about cropping this out for a little more, to remove that distraction. But for me, that kind of causes a conflict, because we've got what appears to be a very peaceful, happy, sleeping little boy with a scary shadow, dinosaur, monster. And to me, that creates a conflict in concept. So I kind of like the fact that over here we have this reference as to what's causing the shadow, and that there's no need for being upset. He's peacefully sleeping, and that's completely understandable. This isn't his nightmare, and something terrible is not about to happen to him. So I like leaving it there. Alright, so what could we do to address some of these issues? First, I think these areas in here are a little brighter than they need to be. I'll pull that down, pull that down, pull those highlights off of the mirror. You can see over here we've toned this down quite a bit. And maybe I'll pull that down even a little harder. Alright. Now, yeah, I've affected this area of the image, but we can bring that back. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring maybe the blacks down. Bring those down a little. I don't like blacks. Let's try shadows. Alright, let's bring up the contrast. Alright, so we're getting there. Our shadow's stronger. We've toned this down quite a bit, and we still have good light on the little boy, so we're getting there. Next thing we do here is maybe take an adjustment brush, and we can take the exposure, pull that down, and we'll hit this area over here. Whoops. Still have that color set on the brush, so let's get rid of that. Alright, get rid of that color, go away, and we'll tone this down some more. So we just have a hint of what's going on there. And yes, I was pretty sloppy with that, so we can take that out, erase that while we're done. So we tone that down a little bit more, and we're going to take another brush up here, and we're going to tone this whole area down. Let's see if I can get rid of that. It might be a bit heavy overall, so we can go back in here and which one do we want to adjust? Shadows? Alright. So we started here, bright image, a little distracting over here, a little weak on the shadows, and we end up here, darker shadows, good emphasis. This is the brightest area, so we're focused, draws us to the person for a human connection. And we've got this still left here. It might still be a little distracting. A little more work could maybe help that. To kind of tell us why we have this and explain why he's sleeping peacefully instead of scared. So this is, I think, what I would do with this image. And I really like the creativity of this image. I like the story it tells. And I like the human connection. So this image to me is a strong B. Perhaps a B+. Depending you know, this it's a marketable image, you know. I can see that being sold to some purpose or other. Outstanding. Like it. Alright, got an image, and this image is by Karen, and we've got 18 millimeter a 10 to 18 at 18 millimeter, 5.6, which is wide open on this lens at 18 millimeter, and 1/400th ISO 100. So plenty of shutter speed, more than necessary. Low ISO, which is good. Could have stopped down for better sharpness. Yeah, you could have stopped down for better sharpness and maybe more depth of field. And that being a really wide lens is not really necessary. This was taken fairly close. First thing is it a shadow image? And it's similar to the Adrian's image. I think that was what it was, where what we're really looking at is the light cutting through the shadows, primarily. So yes, it's dependent on the shadows. And I'm not sure it's a shadow image as such. It's more a light image through the shadows. But that's not the biggest issue. I think the biggest issue for me is I don't really know what I'm looking at. It took a while. I realized this is an awning with holes cut through it, and this is the light cutting through the awning. And then it gets kind of weird down here until you realize that this is the light hitting a double paned window, causing this effect of the light doubled up and overlaying things that are inside, which is kind of interesting. But I think for me the biggest problem is everything's broken. Everything's broken. It's not quite complete. So I don't have a full pattern anywhere. I guess we'd say this, what we have of them is complete, going left to right there. So I don't know, I don't connect with this image very strongly at all. So if for no other reason for me, that image is going to be a C, because without some kind of connection, whether I understand why or not, an image is going to fall short, and this one does for me, unfortunately. Alright, for me that's a C. And then we have an image by Mark. And again, because I stole this image, I don't have EXIF. But when I did look at the EXIF, I did not see any issues other than the image was stopped down pretty far. I think it was like f18 or something like that. Farther than you really want to stop down on an APS camera. Around f11, f8, if I remember correctly, this is a 24 megapixel APS camera. Which means f8 is your last safe aperture. Beyond that, you're pushing into diffraction, which is only going to cost you light and detail. So anything f8 and wider, depending upon the lens, above f8 when you need to. And I don't know that you really needed to go to f18 or whatever it was for this image, because it's a silhouette. So really all we needed to do was have the edges in focus. So we only had to be focused halfway into her to have these edges, and we really didn't need hardly any depth of field at all in order to do that. I don't know that it's really hurt this image. There's plenty of detail there. I don't know that we would have gained any. Yeah. Well, what detail there is. All right. It is a profile shadow image, and to me, it's a picture of her. It's not a picture of a shadow. It's kind of like I said with my image, where the stop sign shadow became a stop sign more than it was an image of a shadow. It was too literal, and I think that's the case here as well. This is too literal. As far as it goes, it reminds me of the old-fashioned portraits. They used to do the paper cutout portraits, And I like that. I don't think this was accomplished in camera. This has pretty heavy editing done to it in order to achieve this, because that brighter background, you know, or pure white, and I don't normally like pure white unless unless it's going to be displayed on a pure white background as well. So like if this was going on a white website page or something like that, but otherwise the contrast and the brightness tends to be a bit too much. I tend to pull them down somewhere in the, geez, we're not getting anywhere with it. Best I can do is pull that down to 98 and I want it somewhere around 95, 90. Somewhere in there. Just so it's not quite as harsh light shining right at you. If you were putting on a white display, you wouldn't want to do that. You'd want to keep it white. Alright, editing wise, I would probably get rid of these. Not a big deal. Let's get rid of those real quick. Ooh, where did that go? Alright, stupid thing. Alright, basically just spend a little bit of time cleaning out those strays that don't serve a purpose. Maybe even those. But otherwise, I think it's well done. I give it a, I don't know, B minus, I guess. If it was my daughter, I'd probably feel a lot more strongly about it. So B minus, C plus. Not sure it's a Shadow's image, but it is definitely an image of Shadow. I'm not entirely certain how much of this was done in post as opposed to actually being a Shadow image. You could create this from a regular image that had no shadows in it at all. But we'll just assume it is a shadow. And B. Alright, I do believe that's it for this month. And we're done. I hope you've found this helpful and take what I have had to say in the manner it was intended. And I will see you again next month. Thank you. Bye.